before I start. Right. So hopefully you can see this. Right, real-time bidding. Um, Given there's not that many of us, I'm quite happy for interruptions, I think, today. There's not a huge number of slides. I'm just sorting out my desktop so I can see if anyone's got their hand up. Um, so what I thought we'd go through is an overview what real-time bidding is. So a little bit what's called the audience taxonomy, what type of data is held about you, more about shadow profile, how do they know it's you, a bit of a discussion whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, and rounding off with, what can you personally do about this? Now, a little bit of a warning. Although a lot, in fact, most of what we're going to talk about today is from public sources, and of course, as usual, I got the references at the back. Because of the nature of this topic, it's a little bit hidden, it's a little bit secretive. Some of these things are inferred. So I'll just put myself a little disclaimer there. So, so today, what I'm going to talk about is 100 milliseconds. That's what we're going to talk about, 1/10 of a second. So if you go to a website, now I'm using the Mail, dailymail.co.uk, because it's a really bad site from an ad point of view. So for today, it's a really good test case for us to look at. Now, if you're quick, you go onto these websites and instead of seeing the ads instantly, you'll see what we've got here, and that is a blank placeholder. And it's not clear actually, but there's also placeholders on the left and right here for additional ads. And so what happens is that you go to the website, you initially get blank, and within less than 100 milliseconds, targeted ads will appear on your website, on your web page. And in fact, it takes about between 10 and 20 milliseconds, 1/100th of a second, typically. But what they try to do is to try and give you targeted ads within 1/10 of a second, 100 milliseconds. So what we're going to talk, and of course, these ads are custom to you. If your friend opens up the same page, they'll see completely different ads. It's not random. They are selected specifically for you. So the question, what we're going to talk about today is, how does this work? How do they find out it's you? And how do they find out lots of information about you so that ads are sent to you as, close to your interests and your preferences as possible? After all, from an advertiser's point of view, they don't want to send you adverts that you're not interested in, because you're very unlikely to buy from it. If they send adverts that you might well be interested in you, higher chance you're going to click on them, higher chance you're going to buy something from them. So actually finding out much as possible about you is really important for the advertisers. So how does all this work? So overall process. So we start off with our empty web page. I'm going to say it's not empty. We've got lots of stuff on there, but we've got these gaps where it's going to be filled with advertising. Now, of course, your desktop here, this is your desktop here, is coming from a publisher, a web publisher. In this case, it's the Daily Mail. And they are, creating all the fonts and text and stuff, sending it to your browser. Now, the first thing that needs to happen is the publisher needs to figure out who you are. Now, that might be quite easy if you're logged into the website, got an email address and they know who you are. But if you're not logged in, they will still know who you are. And we'll go into this a little bit of data. So the first problem to solve is identifying who you are. Now, the publisher is connected to what's called the supply side platform. This is about the supply side is where the adverts is served to. And the supply side platform has got this huge database associated with it. And this is the database of everything it can find out about you personally. And we have a bidding platform. So what happens is this some identifier about you that the publisher has discovered because you're on their website. That is combined with the data that is held about you, and it creates in the real-time bidding user info. And that's going to contain things like your recent browsing history, your sexuality, your earnings, your age, your family members, whole bunch, potentially tens of thousands of pieces of information about you. And that information is given to the demand side of this real-time bidding, which ends in these advertisers. So your user info is saying, we've got this guy online on this website now. He's just been surfing What Car magazine. All right, he's over 55. He's got £1 million in the bank. He's an environmentalist, and those sorts of information, a few of these advertisers will pick up. And because of the nature of the information, some of those advertisers, it's going to be worth quite a lot of money to serve the ad to your browser window. So in this case, there might be a electric car advertiser who's looking at a profile and said, right, ideal person to buy an electric car. I'm going to offer 20 cents to send an advert to this guy's desktop. And so all the advertisers there who get this user information go into this real-time bidding war. And what happens is we get a winning bid. One of these advertisers has agreed to pay the most amount of money to serve you an ad. And lo and behold, you get an ad on your desktop. Paul.
Yeah, Peter, is this before this talk? Is this prior to the recent censorship crackdown by the government with this age verification? Because if they're forcing to give people to go to a website to verify of the choice of the website you're visiting, some of those, well, I haven't yet come across an anonymous way of doing it properly anyway. There now seems to be, to access a lot of things, including just Reddit user groups on computing and things, potentially people are going to have to do either real hard ID or give something like their face that can be then linked to a hard ID. And that data then becomes real hard ID data associated with you. Whereas I think what you're talking about here, I might be wrong, is what's been going on up until very recently, about 2 weeks ago, isn't it?
Yes. What you just said last there, Paul, is correct. As my understanding is this real-time bidding process for targeted ads.
Right, and it's based on what they already know about you, what they infer about you.
Yep.
Whereas once we've got it now, but once people give up their do their age verification checks, effectively you've got an attributable ID to a almost real world, if not certainly real world persona for that person, which I think, well, I won't jump the gun on this, but I think it's going to lead to an explosion of data, isn't it, that they know about us?
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit in a minute about
Yeah.
what sort of data is in this platform. But as
Okay.
far as I know, the mechanism to find your your age for certain websites is nothing to do with real-time bidding.
Okay. Yeah.
But
So what
as far
you've got in
as
that data management platform, then, just to clarify, is what they think they know about you, and in some cases they will know because people have used real names and addresses for their accounts. I mean, you have to do for, say, Amazon because you want things delivering to you, but for other stuff, it's inferred, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk a little bit what's in there at the moment. My guess is specifically for this age verification, there may be some data brokers who are offered money containing that sort of information, which ends up in here.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I can't tell really. So just playing on. So in theory, yeah, in theory, the data in this platform is anonymous. So the real-time bidding, the way it's supposed to work is that this user ID is just a long string, just random digits, and it doesn't really understand, things like your name and your address. However, we'll see a little bit later that's probably not true. Now, if after the meeting you want to look up about this sort of stuff, what most people call this is they call it a shadow profile. So this is very different to, for example, the information that's held in your Google profile or your Facebook profile, stuff you can see and stuff you can delete. This shadow profile is completely separate to that. And in fact, as far as I can see, there's no way you can actually see what's in there, probably because it's supposed to be anonymous. Now, of course, as well as this ad flowing, which is, hopefully giving you an ad that you might actually be interested in, there's, of course, actually a cash flow here as well. So because these advertisers are going to pay a few cents per ad placed, that, of course, multiplies up. And if you've got, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of visitors, each page has got, 10 adverts on, all those amounts of 10, 20 cents get added up. So suddenly there's a lot of money slushing around here. And of course, a small amount will go to the publisher. So, if you're interested in setting up your own website, then you can hook into this sort of stuff and display ads and actually get some revenue for it. And platforms like, YouTube and Facebook, I presume, will actually have it as part of the platform. So you have a YouTube account. If you have so many followers, you can actually start to participate in this advertising and actually get a little share of this cash that's sloshing around here. So that's the essence of real-time bidding. There's this mechanism to find out who you are on your web page. There's this mechanism that goes through over the years and gathers as much information about you as possible. There's this combining of that it's you on the web page and all this information that is shared to advertisers. Advertisers will bid for the right to send you an advert. The winning bid gets to show the ad, and the advertiser pays a little bit of money to show that ad on your page. So hopefully that's pretty clear. And this is all reality. I'm not making stuff up. You can go on to Wikipedia and read all about this. Just look up real-time bidding on Wikipedia. Oh, data that can be held about you in this database. Well, somewhat surprisingly, there is a standard for this. And there's a company, Interactive Advertising Bureau, which holds standards for this database. And I'll put the link in there directly. And it's called the Audience Taxonomy. And we can have a look. So it is a standard. I'll show you some examples from it in a minute. However, from reading between the lines and court cases and whatnot, companies will hold significantly more information that's in that standard. So this is, I think, this audience taxonomy is really a minimal amount of information it will hold about you. And it includes hard information, stuff that it's found out from, I don't know, it could be, electoral records or things that it's bought. So it'll know your age, your gender, occupation, your mortgage on your house, financial status, hard information, which, you can't really dispute. And then you've got the sort of like softer type things, which is called interests. And these are medium and long-term interests and passions and so on. Yeah.
Pete,
Yeah.
and I'm not that completely computer savvy, but if you're using a VPN, or something like that, how does it get back to the sort of base data about you? I mean, how's it unwinding?
Can I put that question to one side for a second?
Yeah, fine. Okay.
Because I've got just the tool for you. And Paul's going to ask exactly the same question, I know. And of course, as well as demographic interest, there's also purchase intent. what things you're likely to purchase, products and services. And here's some examples. So it's got demographic, gender, household data, your income and such like, medical interests, I don't know, life events, baby showers, births, whole bunch of stuff. There's thousands of individual pieces of data that can be in that database about you. So where does this come from? Where does all this data from? Four main sources. So firstly, there's explicit data. Well, explicit data is stuff that you've given yourself. So that could be from, your email system, if that's going through one of the system, particularly things like Gmail, Google searches, you're doing these searches and you're actually, when you type in a Google search, you're actually giving that piece of data, just what you search for, you're giving that to Google, and Google will probably put it into their real-time bidding system. And of course, social media platforms, Facebook and X. Really, I think we're in a position now where whatever you volunteer on, fairly open platforms, outside of banking and such like, belongs to them, not to you. So, if you've got some pictures of your, daughter's birthday or something uploading to Facebook, they now belong to Facebook, and then they go and do whatever they like with it. So explicit data is the stuff that you essentially volunteer. And of course, there's a whole bunch of data processing going on there to extract all the useful pieces of information from that and put it into your shadow profile so it can be used for advertising. Metadata is another category. Now, metadata is data about data. So if you think about a telephone bill, so a telephone bill will consist of, the from number, the to number, the time of day, call duration, and well, that's about it. That is metadata about your telephone calls. So your telephone bill doesn't have the actual conversations that you had on the telephone, only, what times of day and who from and to. Now, it turns out for this real-time bidding, that metadata is really quite useful for these real-time bidding processes. And you can go onto sites like EFF, the privacy advocates, and they've got loads of examples on there. They'll have things like if you phoned your gynecologist at 2:30 in the afternoon, spoke to them for 10 minutes, and then 2 hours later you phoned the abortion clinic. You don't need to know what was in the context of that call, but you know pretty well with a high degree of certainty that you know the sorts of things that were discussed on the call. So metadata can be really, really quite important. And these things are, ISPs, if they're monitoring what websites they go to, they can't tell what part of the website you go to, but they can tell that you go into a website. Phone connections, things like WhatsApp calls, all these sorts of things, which may be monitored for like billing purposes or just traffic manipulation purposes. But that just very simple data about data can be quite useful for these platforms. We've also got third parties, and these are where the data brokers come in. So, particularly there is, these industries, particularly insurance, seems to come up time and time again. Some industries do try to gather a lot of information about you, and they will sell. There is this industry now of data brokers. You can go on online. You can search for data brokers, and you can buy information about people. And these real-time bidding platforms will be buying that sort of information from the data brokers. And finally, there's a fourth category called offsite. So we talked about explicit data, things that you're volunteering, say when you go on your Facebook page, you go on facebook.com, type in a few things, you're given whatever you type to Facebook, and they may choose to use it as part of this real-time bidding. But they can also monitor you when you're on different websites using techniques like third-party cookies or these zero-size pixels. browsing history. Like buttons is a very popular one. Let's say you go on to, let's stick with the same example. I'm just making this up now, but you might go on to Daily Mail webpage and it's got a little Facebook like button on there. You click on that and immediately that's sending information to Facebook, not Daily Mail. It's sending information to Facebook that you've actually been on the Daily Mail website. So there's kind of quite cunning mechanism for this off-site tracking. So you might find, all right, so this might happen. You might go on to say Facebook. Let's say you go on to Amazon and you do some purchases on Amazon, and then you go to Facebook and you see some adverts which is related to things that you've just bought on Facebook. And the reason that works is because Amazon are actually sending information to Facebook about the information there. And I made that up, just an example, just to set the scene. So lots of sources of information, and over time, this shadow profile gets more and more accurate about you, and therefore more and more useful for the advertisers. Paul.
Yeah, just quickly, in terms of the offsite, does opening another tab or another window for your browser actually circumvent the HTTPS or HTTP referrer, which has been around since the start of the internet, hasn't it? So you've got the back button.
Well, I'll show you an example in a minute, Paul, and it will make absolutely no difference whatsoever.
Okay, thanks. The bastards have got you one way or another, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to show you in a minute, Paul, a tool that you can use that for your particular configurations and setup, you can answer those sorts of questions yourself. Right. So the other question is they've got all this data about you, but how do they know it's you? So the easiest thing is you've logged in. You've gone onto Facebook, for example, and you've logged in, with your username and password. And now, of course, Facebook knows exactly who you are. But you could also be logged in via Google. You might be just browsing, your Google Drive or whatever, or your browser might be logged in to Google, and that will be enough to identify who you are. But then, the bigger problem is, how do they figure out it's you if you're not logged in? Well, there's a whole ton of mechanisms that it does. So some devices have advertising ID built into them. And of course, we've got cookies. So if you go onto a website, you go to dailymail.co.uk for the first time, it realizes you're the first time, it will send some cookies back to your browser. Your browser would store them on your local hard disk. And when you go back a second time, that cookie is presented back to the website, so they know it's you visiting for the second time. And cookies is used to store state. And tracking pixels, so particularly Facebook will offer a zero size image on a website, particularly on a website that is not part of Facebook. And when you go and download that zero size pixel, the network traffic that goes across is actually enough to identify who you are. Phones and tablets and so on actually have a device ID built into them, which you can go and delete if you want. And third-party trackers, which we talked about, which includes tracking pixels, but also other mechanisms. Sometimes they'll look at your IP address, or if it's a phone, GPS status, to find out where you are. So if you know your IP address and you come in a second time, that's a big part of information that identifies who you are. And of course, now here's an interesting thing. There is a difference between using, say, the Facebook app on your phone and using Facebook in a browser on your phone. The Facebook app, in the installed apps, is very likely to be getting all sorts of information about your device and sending it to Facebook. Whereas a browser, you're in control of the browser and you can actually reduce that sort of effect. Now, there's another big subject here called fingerprinting. And as you can imagine, we're into a bit of a arms race here. So once people started blocking cookies to stop this sort of stuff, the real-time bidding came up with a new way to try and find out it's you, and it's just a big big arms race going on here. So there's this generic concept of a fingerprint. Now, when you think about it, if you're at home on your Chrome browser, when you go to a website, there's a whole bunch of information that gets sent to that website. So they'll know your IP address of your house, they'll know your screen size, your language you're using, what else? Your resolution as well as size, bits per pixel. There's about 20, 30 pieces of information about your configuration that gets sent to that site. Now, normally that's good information because it means when you get the web page back, it's going to be sized appropriately to your screen and in the right language and so on and so forth. But of course, you're giving away all this kind of information. And what fingerprinting is about is taking all these little pieces of information together, glue them all together, and it turns out you can usually get a unique fingerprint per person just by what your browser sends. So yes, combination of browser type, version, screen size, and so on and so forth. So a little bit more on fingerprinting because this is kind of quite an interesting one, I think. So there's a really good site here, fingerprint.com. And actually, this is a company that sells software to do fingerprinting. And they got a tab at the top, which is a demo. And that actually means that you can go in and test it with your browser and try various things. So the general idea is you go to this website, fingerprint.com, you have a look at what fingerprint it's returning. I'll show you a screenshot in a minute. You can clear your cookies, you can enable private browsing, you can turn on your VPN, whatever you like to do. You go back to the website and the chances are very high you get identical number back. So here we are, here it is. So it's actually fingerprint.com/demo. And here is my fingerprint. It's just this sequence of numbers. It's telling me a little bit of information, let's say there's a bit of a hint here. Try visiting on VPN or in, the private mode, your visitor ID will be the same. And you can actually scroll down a bit on here and actually gives you a little bit more information, sorts of information this website has gathered about your request to form this, they call it a visitor ID. There. So there's one for you, Paul. Fingerprint.com/demo. Try all your VPNs and different configurations and see if you get this same number back.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I've just opened it.
Yeah. And I'm expecting you'll be frightened about that because, as I say, it's a little bit of an arms race. A couple of years ago, you turned on VPN, you get a different fingerprint, and these, real-time bidding system would assume it's a completely different person if you're using your browser at home to use it on VPN. But it really is looking like it doesn't really matter if you've got a VPN or not.
Well, I think there are some things in the device ID, isn't there? Because each one effectively has got an individually coded MAC address for things like the modem card and things like that. Yep. In your phone. Yep. And those, I believe, can be fingerprinted remotely. It just depends what software you're using as to how much of that is exposed. Because obviously, if you spin up a virtual machine or something like that, then that's another way of protecting it. But I haven't looked recently into just what the modern devices are actually giving away about the individual hardware fingerprints.
Yeah, it's a lot better than it used to be. I mean, obviously you can find a different browser that claims to have all these different privacy settings and try that. My experience so far is actually pretty hard to fool it. So I thought we'd have a look about who are these companies that are doing this, trying to put some, color on put some names on this. So there's the big five tech platforms. that we all know: Alphabet, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, and Apple. If you go to, I don't know, Financial Times or something, they'll talk about the big five companies. So Alphabet, it's obviously got Google, and it's also got YouTube and other, platforms in there as well. So you can be sure if you're using YouTube or doing Google search that it's going to be tied up in the same real-time bidding system. And Meta, of course, has got Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Threads. Microsoft is, on the Microsoft desktop and services. They also own LinkedIn and GitHub and no doubt many others. Amazon we know as the shopping channel, and Apple, of course, sell hardware, operating systems, and so on. Now, some of these platforms, some of these companies rather, also sell cloud services. Now, that's an interesting thing to know because if you're a commercial company, let's say Marks and Spencer's, you want to take your web server, you need to host it somewhere. You need someone to look after those servers. And one of these companies is very likely to be hosting the website for Marks and Spencer's. So Alphabet has got Google Cloud. Meta don't have one. Microsoft have got Azure. Amazon have got Amazon Web Services. And Apple doesn't have one either. So we've got three big cloud. There are other cloud services. We've got three big cloud services. The thing is about these is if you use these cloud services and you want to host your application on there, your website or your billing platform or whatever, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can make use of. You can plug in databases, you can plug in billing system, credit card systems, whatever, and also real-time bidding applications. So, if you want to build your website using Azure, you're going to be using Microsoft's real-time bidding system to monetize your ads on your website. Now, there's been some purchases of companies. So really back in the early days of the World Wide Web, there was this company called DoubleClick who everyone hated. And this is now part of Alphabet. And DoubleClick managed the real-time bidding system for Alphabet. And you'll see this, you see DoubleClick, doubleclick.com. If you go onto a website, you might see it flash by when it's, sending information up to the real-time bidding system or downloading an ad for your desktop. Meta have got Xandar, I think that's how you pronounce it. Again, they purchased it, used to be an independent company. Microsoft have got, I think they call it Microsoft Ads. They might call it Azure Ads, I'm not sure. Amazon have got Amazon Ads. There's some novel naming schemes come up here, and Apple have got Apple Ads. So think about, no, I'll mention this in passing actually. We kind of know Amazon as the shopping channel, but this AWS, Amazon Web Services, is much bigger than the shopping channel. Amazon Web Services is by far the biggest cloud platform on the planet. This is where Amazon's revenue comes from. Paul.
Yeah, is Apple actually doing any commercial advertising, or is it just advertising Apple products?
No, it's got a real-time bidding system in there.
Has it? Because I thought there was an option in Apple to not have any targeted advertising.
You're ahead.
Sorry.
Give me a few slides. Now, before we go on a bit further, I'd like to mention that there is, I would say, good reasons, or at least reasons that don't involve ads and selling ads and so on. There are good reasons to track you. So some tracking is really non-personal, non-ad, I should say, really. For example, if you've got a website, you want to know how many people are visiting my site. Just simple counts, simple stats. That's kind of quite useful. Nothing to do with real-time bidding, nothing to do with ads. And email, you send emails out. If you're sending bulk email, it's really useful to know, did that email arrive? Because email, you can't actually usually tell if it's arrived or not. And at Youth Create Communities, we use both of these techniques. So I'll share this with you. So if someone in our group sends a meeting invite out or some kind of email, there is tracking in there, and that information gets squirted into this little report, which tells us, how many people clicked on it and how many people unsubscribed and bounced. So this is tracking. This is tracking what you're doing, but nothing to do with real-time bidding. This is just trying to add some counters together. So whoever sent that email knows that most of them didn't bounce, or maybe no one's listening. Everyone's being put it into your spam folder straight away or something. You need to know if your emails are failing in various ways. So there are some non-ad reasons for tracking you. So is this bad? It's kind of like an interesting question, because the thing is, many sites, many sites are free. You don't pay for them. And the only reason they can be free is because they get ad revenues. So if this real-time bidding didn't exist, then each website that was needed significant effort to keep it running, you'd have to pay for. And also, of course, you might be happy receiving ads that you might actually be interested in. If you are just going around shopping for a car and you suddenly get an advert for this nice new electric car that you've never heard of, that might be actually quite useful to you. So I'm not saying this is bad, it depends on your perspective. So you get useful ads, and it does mean that your website is funded. It's free as far as you're concerned. But of course, free is a little bit misleading, because effectively what you're doing is you are giving your data to the real-time bidding system, and in return, you're receiving a free website. But personal data that's being gathered is effectively being given away to these advertisers. It makes me laugh. You see a lot of adverts for these big companies. The one that's in my mind at the moment, Google have got this advert saying, "We do not sell your data," which is true. They give it away for free to these advertisers. They don't sell it at all. Some quite interesting YouTube videos about that. Of course, this shadow profile is hidden from you. It's not part of your Google profile. It's not part of your Facebook profile. You cannot request it. It's not transparent. It's hard to know what's really going on. And here's an interesting one. So if you don't have a Facebook account, Facebook will still have a shadow profile about you. So you can't even go to Facebook and say, "Request my data," because you don't have an account there. And a lot of people, Third Age Trust is looking at next year's Youth Festival. And I remember in the first Youth Festival, was a year and a half ago or so, there was this comment, someone was kept, if more than one person says, "Is my computer listening to my conversations? Is it using its microphone to listen to what I'm talking about?" No, or at least probably not. But this real-time bidding, gathering this information from you, not just your desktop, not your phone, but other people in your house, people that you're related with, that you've just been talking about things. If you talk to your friend that you're about to buy a car, your friend might go and do some searches for some car as well, because it's triggered their interest. And this shadow profile might have you two linked together. So even though you didn't do searching for cars on the web, the fact that you're linked together in a shadow profile means you might get the adverts. Now, this is a big one as far as I'm personally concerned, and I mentioned this when we did the Fediverse talk. Cambridge Analytica was, thankfully it's gone now, a British company. And what it did, essentially use this real-time bidding information to find out as much as possible about the electorate in terms of their voting intentions, and then did targeted political ads to try and get you to vote the way they were being paid. So, for example, if you in your shadow profile, it says you had a leaning to vote for Remain in the Brexit vote, but only just. and it also knew that you were a retired coal miner, let's say. The real-time bidding system would then look at that. With Cambridge Analytica, they would actually start sending you messages saying, if you vote Remain, then there'll be, you know, 1 million jobs lost in the coal mining industry or something like that. You know, completely made up stuff depending on your you know, your profile and your background and your voting intention. So this was, for me personally, this was particularly the Brexit was a big time when I realized what was going on, and then I just dumped Facebook and a whole bunch of other stuff. As well as advertising, there's other tricks that websites use, you know, and particularly the social media sites, and they want to do as much as they can to keep you on the site to see as many ads as possible so they get as much revenue from the advertisers as possible. And this is actually part of Social Dilemma. I mentioned this a lot in the Fediverse talk. So, but if you take the real-time bidding and all these algorithms to keep you on the site, then suddenly the ad revenue for this platform just goes through the roof. And Social Dilemma, I'm actually wondering whether it might be useful to play the preview of the Social Dilemma movie. I might actually do that in a minute. Now, there is such a thing as rogue advertisers, and I've got a really good example for you in a minute. So pretty much anyone could be a rogue advertiser. Say, yeah, I'm an advertiser. I'm interested in, you know, widgets or whatever, and I want to sell my widgets. I'm going to pretend to be an advertiser, but of course, all they're doing is getting all this information from you from the real-time bidding system. Neil.
If I remember rightly, in America, they have quite a lot of electronic voting things. Is this a situation in which, you know, it could all be modified, and in fact, you know, if you got something like that, it could be corrupted anyway, and your election, your vote could be altered or anything else like that?
Yeah, not as far as I know. We're talking really about influencing voters effectively via adverts.
Right. Yeah. No,
This
I
is,
know.
you know, so you can imagine, you know, a billboard on the street that says, you know, vote Labour or whatever it says. That is, you know, an untargeted advert. Everyone walk past it and see exactly the same advert. The targeted political ads, you get a unique one for you, depending on, you know, your background, or, you know, your wife's background or your children's background or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so Xandr is, we know, sharing to about 1,600 other companies, and it can be recursive. You know, if you've got an advertiser, they can actually share out to other advertisers. So it's kind of hard to know who's getting the information that's in your shadow profile. I'm going to go through this in a little bit more detail. Yeah, I'm just going to skip through it. So some screenshots now. So there is this group, the Irish Centre for Civil Liberty, ICCL. It's in Ireland, and they have a kind of quite European focus, as you'd expect. But it's an interesting site if you're interested in this, because it actually goes through a lot of the technology behind what they think is, you know, privacy breaches. And they you know, try and take the big guys to court time and time again. But of course, you know, these big five companies, they've got big pockets for the lawyers. Here's another lawsuit from 2022. Again, this is the ICCL operating in America, where they're trying to shut down real-time bidding systems. Now, one thing they call these, I'll probably do it in a minute. The ICCL and others call real-time bidding as the biggest data breach ever that is still going on. You know, it's still harvesting this information for you to, you know, sell ads to you. What else? Oh yeah, this is the interesting one. So I thought this was technically quite clever. So in America, only in America, I suppose, there was this group, and it was a non-profit organization they formed, and they pretended to be an advertiser. And it takes a lot of money to do that sort of thing, but they had a whip around and got it working. And what they were interested in is gay priests. So they were trying to find out if there was any gay people in their local church or gay priests, and by using this real-time bidding system. And apparently there's enough information in there that gives you a high degree of certainty who these people really are in your church. And they spent huge amounts of money participating in real-time bidding to get this information to their local church so they could oust, the people that they didn't like. Go figure. And yes, I mentioned this just now. This is another document from the ICCL. Some of these server-side platforms talk to an ad exchange rather than directly to advertisers. So there's this big fan-out effect of, thousands, tens of thousands of advertisers who could potentially be viewing this data from the shadow profile to send a advert to you. And you really don't know who these advertisers are. They're supposed to be vetted and so on, but because of this big fan out, it's hard to know. Paul.
Yeah, there's nothing to stop, as you say, anybody being an advertiser. So presumably, one of the first things Russian and Chinese intelligence and North Korean and Iranians and all the rest of the thugs in the world that don't have any laws, setting up advertising agencies and hoovering up the lot, is there?
Yes, exactly right. So we'll see that in a minute.
All I will say is that Western agencies do have privacy laws and warrant laws, whereas a lot of, quite a few countries around the world don't seem to have any laws at all.
Yeah, hold that thought. I've got some snippets on this. This is just to give you a feel for it. This in the UK then, and this data is a few years old actually, and it excludes Amazon and Meta. The average person in the UK gets 462 broadcasts to this real-time bidding system a day. So it's not just once a day. It could be several times on a website. You go to a few websites and very quickly you're into the hundreds of times you're sharing this shadow profile to advertisers, which you don't really know who they are. Yeah, Paul's ahead of me as usual. So foreign access to European real-time bidding data. So the ICCL has found out that Google actually sends it to China via some of the companies. This is going back to, I think, 2022 this is published. I've got the references at the back anyway if you want to check. And the thing about sending stuff to China is they might be the nicest people in the world, but by law, Chinese state has access to that information. And Google also sends European real-time bidding data to Russian companies. Again, this might not be quite up to date. This is maybe 2 or 3 years old. Probably predates the Ukrainian war. Russian companies that Google sends EU include AI data, which sends profiles about Russians who visit Russian political opposition websites. So you can see that some of this information gets, added to and expanded upon and things. And the Microsoft's Xandar sends European real-time bidding data to Russian and Chinese as well. One of, I suppose, the points about this is that you and I, first of all, can't see this shadow profile data, and certainly there's no way for us to tell who's receiving it. It's probably a large number of advertisers in quotes. Now there's this app called Patterns with a Z on it. Now this is a company who essentially provides blackmail data to people who want to blackmail rich people or politicians and whatsoever. And this company uses real-time bidding information and I believe other data sources to get information about individuals so they can, basically illegally track them and get into blackmail situations. Here's a screenshot of the app. Yeah, it's kind of frightening once you, start digging into these things. And here's a new one, actually. We were talking about the technology used to track you. And this year, a new technique came out from Facebook. So the Facebook app is known for, all these zero-size pixels that go on websites, and the app will get information. But here's the thing. Android privacy researchers found out that the Facebook app on Android phones was actually connecting to browsers on those Android phones so that Facebook could get information about these other sites you're visiting via your browser and via the localhost connection, which is now I suspect this was a demo or a test or a trial, because they released the Facebook app and it had this feature in it. And then a couple of months later, they released an update and that feature wasn't there. So I suspect, Facebook were actually caught with their pants down, as it were, and quickly fixed the issue. Right, should we play this Social Dilemma trailer? Yeah, why not? Why not? Let me know quickly if you can't hear this. I think it's a couple of minutes, that's all. But this is a trailer for this Netflix documentary. And this Social Dilemma touches on both real-time bidding and also these algorithms that the social media platforms, the documentary actually combines these two things together. So it's kind of quite interesting. But the thing is about this documentary, it includes lots of interviews by engineers and senior staff who actually built these systems. So this isn't a conspiracy theory documentary. It's not a journalist doing it. It's the people who worked on it. So I'll play it. You can. It's only a couple of minutes.
When you go to Google and type in "climate change is," you're going to see different results depending on where you live and the particular things that Google knows about your interests.
That's not by accident. That's a design technique. What I want people to know is that everything they're doing online is being watched, is being tracked. Every single action you take is carefully monitored and recorded.
A lot of people think Google's just a search box and Facebook's just a place to see what my friends are doing. What they don't realize is there's entire teams of engineers whose job is to use your psychology against you.
I was the co-inventor of the Facebook like button.
I was the president of Pinterest,
Google, Twitter, Instagram.
There were meaningful changes happening around the world because of these platforms. I think we were naive about the flip side of that coin.
We get rewarded by hearts, likes, thumbs up, and we conflate that with value and we conflate it with truth.
A whole generation is more anxious, more depressed.
I always felt like fundamentally it was a force for good. I don't know if I feel that way anymore.
Facebook discovered that they were able to affect real world behavior and emotions without ever triggering the user's awareness. They are completely clueless.
Fake news spreads 6 times faster than true news. We're being bombarded with rumors.
If everyone's entitled to their own facts, there's really no need for people to come together. In fact, there's really no need for people to interact.
We have less control over who we are and what we really believe.
If you want to control the population of your country, there has never been a tool as effective as Facebook.
We built these things and we have a responsibility to change it. The intention could be, how do we make the world better? If technology creates mass chaos, loneliness, more polarization, more election hacking, more inability to focus on the real issues, we're toast.
This is checkmate on humanity.
Yeah. Ooh. Interesting. So as I say, this documentary is not only about real-time bidding, but also about, the social media algorithms as well. They kind of combine the two things together. But today I really want to talk about the real-time bidding. So, question is what you can do. This is kind of interesting. You can ignore it. You can ignore this stuff. And as far as I can see, there's really two types of people who choose to ignore these, targeted ads and the data gathering about you. The first type has got no idea this is going on. They probably don't care either. They probably got some suspicion that their data is being taken, but they just don't care. And the second type is, we'll say, they're aware that they're giving data away, but in return for the service of a free platform like Facebook or WhatsApp or something, and they see it as a good deal. They see that's worthwhile. Everyone's tracking me anyway. Happy to give away all the data they can gather, and I get free platforms in return. So I'm not blankly saying here that this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just trying to tease out, pros and cons about it. So yeah, absolutely, you can totally ignore this stuff, and that's fine. But of course, there's some things you could do. So you can at least limit the data you give away. And there's a few techniques you can use for that. So you can use services with a good privacy reputation that don't capture your data or metadata. You can think about what information you volunteer to, what you might think is untrusted platforms. So you might say, right, actually, I know Google's a bad platform. I have to use it, but I'm going to be really careful the way I use it to give them as little information about me as possible. Check privacy policies. Yeah. We all, sign up and read through the privacy policy in endless details. Of course, we don't, but I've got a solution for you if you don't read privacy policies. Now, what you can do is you can block these trackers that are following around on your web page, these cookies, these zero-side pixels, and so on and so forth. There's various browser plugins, applications you can install. In fact, you can install stuff on your home network that tries to block this data that you're volunteering away. You can use a sandbox or container. Most browsers have got this feature built in, which they either call it as a container or a sandbox, which means when I'm accessing this website, treat it very differently to all the other websites I use. And of course, as well as limiting data you give away, you can hide who you are. So, because the real-time bidding needs these two pieces and connects them together. I'm seeing some chat coming up there. If you want to raise something immediately, if you put your hand up, I'm not going to be reading the chat while we're going ahead here. So of course, when you connect to a website, it says, do you want to accept cookies, accept all? You should be able to limit those cookies. Now, some cookies are required. They need it to manage your login. So if you go to a banking system, you log in, a cookie will be sent, you go to the next page. If that cookie wasn't there, then you'd have to log in again and again and again. So some cookies are required, but there's other types of cookies that is used to track you, and you should have that option to opt out of personalized ads. Paul?
Yeah. Do you know if Safari and DuckDuckGo are sandboxed and slightly better at managing cookies?
I don't know. Honest answer, I don't know. I've tried a few browsers. I use Firefox at the moment, and that certainly has the sandbox container. I'll show you a screenshot of it in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, the only other way, I guess, is to put something like Tails on a memory stick and run your kind of more discrete inquiries from that. Things like things you might not want to possibly.
There's other things you can do. So I think most browsers allow you to log in to the browser, like log into Firefox or log into Google. You could have a different account which have different cookies associated with it. So there's a few different ways that you could use browser functions to kind of keep your nasty cookies in one place and your good cookies in another place, if you like. You can use temporary email addresses. So one way these sites will identify you if you're logged in with a known email address. If you use a temporary email address, and most sites, well, what most browsers or operating systems will generate one automatically. You use a temporary email address, and then you do your stuff for that website. You can just delete your email address, and that's going to be still in a shadow profile, but it's going to be associated with some other person. You can try and hide IP addresses via a VPN, but as we saw with the fingerprint.com, VPNs these days are unlikely to help you unless your VPN system does something in addition. I'll mention Tor. Tor stands for the Onion Router, was actually a software from the US military. Yeah, it sounds like a hacker's tool, but it actually came from the US military. And what Tor does is you have a Tor browser and you browse the web, and your data goes through a whole bunch of different servers before it comes out to the internet. Your next request will go to a whole bunch of different servers. So as far as the website is concerned, you come from a different IP address every single request. Neil.
I was going to ask you whether anything you put in the LLMs is actually tracked at all in this. Are they part of this whole system?
So typed into what?
Well, if you're putting, if you're using a prompt to, either discover information,
large language model. Sorry.
Yeah. Is that, because a lot of things that I do now, which I would have actually, at one time used Google search or other things for, I will do via LLMs, and I wonder whether they're all part of this whole, bidding information.
Real time. The answer is they may well do. The companies like OpenAI has privacy policies like any other company, and so you can go and read those. The additional problem you've got with online large language models and generative AI is they may well want to keep your chat history for other purposes. For example, training their large language models for the next version release. So there's an additional use there as well. But yes, you definitely want to check the privacy policy. I personally would expect that before long, when you're using ChatGPT, you'll get all sorts of chat-related adverts coming up, which are going to help fund the AI site. Paul.
Yeah, just on that, I think DuckDuckGo have a privacy-aware Duck AI, and you can choose which large language model you're running. And I don't think they use your data to train it. I know the Apple AI system, if you've got the latest devices, they've done a very good way of double obscuring it, and it's not used to train. But Apple are paying a limited use license fee to ChatGPT for that, or OpenAI. But some of the other browsers, and particularly the one that's built into WhatsApp, the Meta AI, I think if you use that, you're almost certainly training it, and it's using your data. And I think they are explicit about that in their terms and conditions.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Apple AI. They've got a nice little trick, actually, is if you're on your MacBook or your iPhone and you do an AI query, they try to run that first on the device.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
And then if that fails, they got an option to go out to a cloud base. So run it on your device is brilliant, because obviously there's no privacy issues there at all then.
Yeah, but you do need the latest devices to be able to do that. And what I think the plan is to fully integrate it into Siri at some point in the future. Just as an aside, I gather there was quite a lot of flack, and I haven't kept track of this, about Microsoft, and I think it's Copilot, their AI. And there was a lot of stuff about the information that was collecting at one point. But I suspect, like a lot of these things, when it hits the when it hits the big news, these companies quite often tweak things a little bit to to turn down the heat a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I have seen on these online AI tools is that you can either use them for free, a limited amount of time per month
Yeah.
or something, or you pay a monthly subscription. And the two cases there, you can get two different terms and conditions. So if you use for free, you may not have the ability to opt out of them gathering your data. But if you pay for the service, then you may well have that option to opt out.
Although, ironically, unless you're using cash or Bitcoin, when you pay for anything online, you're traceable.
Yep.
Because it goes through your bank account. The banks are required to keep records.
Yes. Come on to that in a little bit. Something that you might want to try. One suggestion I said before, that if you're using an app, so for example, using a Facebook app on your phone or your tablet, you can also do the same thing in your browser on your same device. And those two are going to behave a bit differently from privacy point of view. If you're using the app, you really don't know what information it's gathering from you and from the device and send it to Facebook. But if you run it in the browser and you've configured the browser very well to have all these privacy settings, then you've got much better control of it. And big point really is, if you're worried about these sorts of things, is to test your configuration. So you can look, any browser has got this development mode. I'll give you a show it, and you can actually see the information that's flying over the wire. And that can be really quite interesting. So have a look at your browser traffic. Cover Your Tracks is a website that the EFF run, the Electronic Freedom Foundation. And that is a tool that tests the configuration of your browser. And it will give you feedback of how good your fingerprint setting is on your browser, how good your browser is configured for tracking from site to site. So you can set up your browser, test to there. It shows you some problems. You can reconfigure it, test again, shows it good, and then use Facebook with that browser configuration. And this is a nice site which I've only recently discovered. TOSDR, Terms of Service Didn't Read. And I'll show you some screenshots of that in a minute. And I've already mentioned the fingerprint.com demo. So all browsers will have some sort of configuration. So this is mine. I'm using Firefox, and it's got what it calls enhanced tracking protection. And you can click on standard or custom and various stuff on there. And so you can change the settings, go back to the EFF website, check to see if it's blocking stuff. If not, come and tweak some more, get yourself set up correctly. And this is tracking what's going on over the wire. So with Firefox, there's what they call developer tools. Chrome have it as well. With these developer tools, when you enable it, you get like a second screen at the bottom, and you can look at things like debugging. You can look at network traffic and do some performance, a whole bunch of stuff you can do. But if you look at the network traffic, you can see dailymail.com is fetching this file. Dailymail.com is fetching this file, and so on and so forth. Now I've got an ad blocker on. I use AdGuard, and you can see for example, that Mail Online has tried to connect to Facebook.net. Why? Why is Daily Mail connecting to Facebook? But it's being blocked on my browser. So it's kind of a useful way you can explore what's going on. But be aware, you enable this, a whole bunch of information. So you'll be looking for, is this weird website accessing somewhere that I'm not expecting it to? And you're looking for advertising type companies. Oh yeah, we can say this is Daily Mail accessing Google. Again, that's been blocked by my browser plugin. So you can't tell necessarily by this whether the ad blocker is blocking sharing who you are to the website, or it's blocking passing more information about you. Most of these ad blockers will try and block, you know, both types of access. And this is this container, or what else do I call it? Can't remember now. This is actually a plugin to Firefox, and I think it's called Facebook Container. And when it enables it, what it does, it simply automatically enables it for any Facebook related sites. And you get this little tag in here, and you can use it without the plugin. There's still a feature there, and you can use a special URL in the Facebook link to, you know, constrain the cookies for this into a particular container. So there it is in Firefox. It just appears in there, and also it'll block things like fill-in forms as well, this plugin. We mentioned ads, and I think Paul already mentioned it, is that you can choose typically on your devices to opt in or out to advertising. So this is Android, and it's got a concept of, keep going backwards, of advertising ID. So if you delete it, effectively you get non-targeted ads. But remember, this is only doing one half of the problem. This is going to stop your phone sending who you are to the real-time bidding system. The chances are there's information about you. And Apple have got Apple advertising. You can opt out of personalized ads in a similar sorts of way. Okay, so getting some noise here. I'll just mute that one. And you can opt out as personal ads, as Paul said already, and that will stop your your ID going to real-time bidding system and just really opting out of these targeted ads, but it's not going to stop gathering of information to go into your shadow profile. Privacy policies, yeah. So I'm sure, like me, we all get a privacy policy and you hit next. Yep, I read it, tick, tick, and don't go anywhere near it, because after all, it's going to be hundreds of pages long. And these companies, you know, particularly the big five, make these privacy policies deliberately hard to read, so you actually don't read them. But here's the thing. There's this nice site, Terms of Service Didn't Read, TOSDR.org. Now this organization actually employs European lawyers to read your terms of service and your privacy policies, and they boil down sites into a rating from A to E. So, you know, if your site you're talking to is rated A, then it's a brilliant site. If it's rated E, then it's got some serious concerns about it. So, you know, day-to-day life, you might say, right, I'm only going to engage with companies that are rated C or better. You know, and you'd expect, you know, the companies which are under, you know, financial control, you know, banks and so on, to be pretty high here. There, as well as, you know, having to deal with, you know, European laws and US laws. They've got, you know, banking regulations to adhere to and a whole lot of stuff that other sites don't have. So you would expect financial companies to be pretty good with your data. Companies outside of any other kind of bodies, maybe less so. So here's some examples. Wikipedia, it's rated as B. And it gets some warnings with Wikipedia. So even Wikipedia, you know, one of the best sites on the internet, didn't get an A rating. Apple rated as C. You know, not too bad, but you know, could do better. And Amazon, E. Google, E. Facebook, E. And you know, they're quite useful actually. They give some pretty stark warnings. And remember, this information is from European lawyers who sifted through the terms and conditions and tried to provide a summary. You can drill down into them and so on. So on this site, you can search for various companies. And in fact, what I'll do, actually, I'll unshare, or sorry, zoom out for a minute. And if you have a look at my top window here, at the top corner, I've actually got a plugin that tells me what the rating is of the website that I'm currently using. Of course, it doesn't know all the websites, but do a fair chunk of the ones. So at the moment, I'm using Google Docs, and Google is rated as an E. So it's kind of hinting that I need to stop using Google Docs, really, if I'm particularly concerned about that. So yeah, TOSDR. And I say I've only just recently found that, but I do find it pretty useful to validate companies and websites. Paul.
Yeah, it probably people know this anyway, but it's worth saying again. One of the biggest issues now is clicking a link that somebody sent you, because with phones and iPads, there's no hover over, and in fact, even long press doesn't always work. And so you may get a link that looks pretty innocuous, but it takes you through to a Facebook page or something like that, and then of course they've got something on you. Because what you're seeing in the link visually is not necessarily where it's taking you. And it's just one of those things. It's caught me out a number of times, particularly with, would you believe it, Daily Mail links and things like that. Annoying.
Yeah. Yep, good point. Thank you. So I thought, go on, Neil.
Just a quickie. As you guys tend to know more about this now, I've always been very concerned about trying to unsubscribe to anything, because anything which actually tells you unsubscribe always seems to me to be, the area that you would expect them to most try to use. Is there any evidence that, in fact, that unsubscribe links are pretty dodgy in lots of instances?
Yeah, good point. I can share my personal experiences. So when I left work, where it was 4 years ago or something, I went through a phase of getting a new desktop and cleaning up my IT stuff, and I unsubscribed from a whole bunch of stuff that I was just no longer interested to. And I did exactly that. I found the unsubscribed and clicked on it, and I did probably 100 different ones. All perfectly fine, unsubscribe without an issue. So that was my, personal experience. But yeah, I take your point. They could have an unsubscribe link, and they could be doing anything, of course.
Yeah,
but
I mean, over my life, I've probably subscribed and unsubscribed to about 1,000 things, I would think. And I've always thought, Jesus, this just they're telling you not to press, these sort of things. But
I've actually found it's worked for quite a few websites where I've ended up getting too much mail, and I thought, well, yeah, it's legitimate. I kind of asked for it, but there's so much coming in every day or every week. I can't read it all. But there have been one or two websites where you click unsubscribe and it takes you to some web page, and it's a devil to work out where you actually need to drill down to actually unsubscribe, at which point I usually just abandon it and block my email at that stage.
Yeah, I mean, the GDPR does require you to have an unsubscribe link, but they don't specify how easy it should be to find it.
Yeah, my general experience is most of them are good.
Yeah.
But there will be some rogues out there, there always are, and there'll be some that just don't implement it properly.
I mean, some don't actually give you the right to actually opt out either. And if I don't see them subscribe link, I just ignore them altogether. I won't go to them.
Yeah, that's quite a good policy.
And the other thing you need to be aware of, if you're using certain privacy enhancing tools, when you click through onto the unsubscribe, it may not, of course, carry your actual credentials through at the time, which then you think, what's going on here? And then you realize that to some extent, the privacy that you're using has blocked your stuff going through to take it directly to, unsubscribe me kind of thing.
Yep. Okay, let's go on a little bit further. Some tools. So I'm not going to list all the tools that might help you out if you choose to, try and block who you are or block the data that's gathered about you. As I said, not everyone's interested in doing that, but if you are, then there are some tools. And we've mentioned this before in the talk, AdGuard Home. Now this is, I think, is actually quite a nice way to do it because it actually sits on your whole network and does a pretty decent job of blocking messages to and from these real-time bidding systems. And so if you've got it running on your network, it'll work on your phone, it'll work for your desktop, it'll work for your television, and you know, smart TVs do ads these days. So, you know, it's got a fair chance of blocking things. And yeah, so there's a link. And so my wife, for example, she's got an iPhone. She's got no other ad blocking installed on her iPhone. But when she uses Facebook on her phone, you know, still not talked her out of it, but you know, she uses Facebook. But when she goes to a different network, she's always astonished how much advertising is all over the place. So I think this running on your home network does actually do a pretty good job to block these things for your whole network. And of course, you just need to install it once, and then anyone using your network will fit on that. Ray.
Or is that installed on the router or on each device?
What it is we might cover this next month when we talk about home security, actually. So on your browser, if you type in like bbc.co.uk, there's a mechanism that converts that name, bbc.co.uk, that text, into an IP address of a server. And the network service that does that is called DNS, Domain Name Service. And, you know, Google runs them and there's a whole bunch of stuff. And your ISP will probably run one. And so by default, when you sign up to your broadband provider, you are probably using the DNS server that the ISP provides for you, or you might be using a DNS server from Google or, you know, one of the big ones. So what AdGuard Home is actually a local DNS server, and it's a caching server. So if you look up bbc.co.uk, your desktop will go to this local DNS server. If it doesn't know about it, it will go to Google and do a lookup and then go. If you do a second lookup, it will cache it. So it can be a way to speed up DNS caching. But of course, because you're managing your lookups locally on your network, you can configure it for sites like doubleclick.net, just reply with nothing, you know, just don't reply, or, you know, all the lookups go into Facebook or Google or something like that. You can configure that in your local DNS cache by AdGuard Home, and then that'll affect all of your DNS lookups on the whole network. Neil.
So is this doing something? Oh, it sounds like it's doing something very similar to the Pi-hole system.
An alternative is Python.
Thank you. I'll shut up and go away.
And yeah, it does exactly the same sort of idea. A local cache and DNS server tries to block lookups for any kind of suspicious sites. And of course, along with these systems, you get lists of ad sites, you know, and so these you need to keep updating them. So, you know, new bad advertiser comes on board, you get that in its configurations. If you're interested, I can show you my AdGuard Home page. Paul.
Yeah, it's a quick one. If you're using a VPN, presumably the DNS is at the VPN, isn't it? I think it has to be, doesn't it?
No, you can choose.
Oh, you can choose.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because obviously you're encrypting the traffic straight to the VPN. The question is whether the DNS gets resolved to start with on your browser, or whether it goes to the VPN and the VPN passes it on.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I don't know, but I'd imagine you can find VPN services who provide a VPN, a virtual private network, an encrypted channel, but also provide other things as well, like, you know, a blocking DNS server or blocking this or blocking that.
Yeah, well, I've just posted in the chat actually that I know that Proton VPN, which I use, does actually block a lot of malware, adware, and all that, and those trackers and things like that. I'm not saying it blocks them all, and I think one or two other VPNs do it as part of what you're paying for.
Yeah, yeah. So that often fools me because a VPN is like a technical thing. But of course, the VPN companies, they provide this VPN technical service, but they may provide lots of other privacy type services as well. They still call it a VPN service, but it can be a little bit confusing what actually they're doing. Okay. AdGuard also have a desktop app. So that will work for all applications on your desktop. And they've also got a browser plugin. The advantage of a browser plugin is that as well as blocking, giving your ID out to the real-time bidding system or excess information, they can actually reformat the web page a bit. So instead of having empty areas on the web page where advertisers can be, these browser plugins can actually tidy up the HTML to actually remove these empty boxes to make it look a bit better. Yeah, I got an alternative one here, Privacy Badger, which is another really popular one, which is directly from EFF, and that's a browser plugin that will do this blocking as well. So I'm not going to particularly recommend one or the other. There's loads more as well of these, but I just wanted to talk about two different sorts, or three different sorts really. You can have this DNS server on your home network that blocks most things for most of your devices on your network. You can have a desktop app, and you can have a browser plugin. And as we were talking, I should have added this here. You can have a service that your VPN provides you. So coming on to a summary, and I'm sure there's going to be some additional chats as well, just to summarize all of this. So real-time bidding is a system that sends targeted ads to you via this bidding process. A shadow profile is used to contain data about you from many sources. Some of which it gathers from stuff that you do. Some of it gathers things that you volunteered. Some stuff it gets which is bought from other data brokers and so on. And you're identified by some sort of a username or an ID or a fingerprint or some other mechanisms. And those two pieces of information, your ID plus your shadow profile, are glued together to share with the advertisers so they get a chance to bid to present an advert on your web page or your app. But there's some good sides here, right? So you might well get an advert that you're actually quite interested in. And of course, it does mean that sites are provided for free, and they get revenue from ads. Look at Facebook. Facebook's $1 billion company, one of the biggest companies on the planet, and it doesn't sell any products, or next to no products. They'll sell a few things. So it gets a vast majority of its revenue, this $1 billion company, just from servicing ads. So it's definitely in its interest to get you to see as many ads as possible. And your shadow profile is given to many advertisers.
Hello. I'm fine. I'm just busy at the moment.
I'll mute him. Okay. So your data may be leaked. It could be hacked, right? It's real-time bidding process. If they got hacked, we wouldn't necessarily know about it, but we know it's also gets shared to less than kosher advertisers. So rogue advertisers use the data for various sorts of gains. And if this whole system bothers you, you can at least try to avoid giving too much data into your shadow profile and blocking who you actually are to kind of stop these two types of information going to the real-time bidding system. And some references. Right. Shall I stop sharing to see if there's any other comments? Or I'll tell you what, which is what I'm sharing here. I'll show you my AdGuard. I actually run AdGuard as part of my home automation service. So this is AdGuard, and you can see for the last 24 hours, I got 243,000 queries, and AdGuard has blocked 60,000 of them. So there's a large number of blockage it does do. And you can dig through here and have a look at the query log if you like, and you can see which ones have been blocked. Some calls out to Amazon have been blocked, and to Google, and so on and so forth. Quite a lot of stuff have been blocked by AdGuard Home. So it gives you a nice little web interface, and I like it because you just put it on your network once, and then it works for your whole network. But of course, you can do the app or browser plugin as well. So I just want to show you that before I stop sharing. So any other comments then before we push on? Paul, surprise.
Yeah. Well, just as an anecdote, I think there was there was a legal case recently. Somebody on mobile data roaming got quite a high bill, and tried to sue. I don't know where it got to the ad companies and that, because that wasn't what they were expecting to. There was a lot of this stuff going on in the background they weren't blocked from, and it ran up quite a bill. But coming on to what's happened in the last 2 weeks. This online age gating that's going on, and it isn't just for porn. I mean, firstly, as a comment, and I've checked this because I don't watch porn, but I've checked it. If you're using a VPN, you can get at some pretty nasty stuff. And actually, in a lot of countries, what is available to kids using a VPN is not even legal porn. The UK porn industry is regulated, and illegal stuff does get taken down if the content providers or the police get to find out about it. So we've got this new thing that's come in 2 weeks ago, I think, about this age verification. Maybe it's going to be a separate subject, but I can't think of a good way to do it completely anonymously, firstly. And secondly, even if you use your face like you would at a pub or supermarket checkout to buy your bottle of wine, if you upload your face to some third party or even first party age checking, if somebody anywhere in the world has tagged you in a group photo, even Facebook have got the facial recognition algorithms to work out who you are. So it seems to me that this new law they've brought in is going to destroy a lot of anonymity, privacy, and safety on the internet, and that these advertising companies and the rest, even the more nefarious companies, will know far more about us now as people start having to age verify just to get to, say, things like Reddit sites. I got stopped the other day. I didn't give it my information, but I got stopped, and it was something to do with a computer thing I was looking up. If this is going to happen and they don't get it sorted out fast, it seems to me that we're going to be in a much worse situation than what we've just heard about.
Yep. Good points. Adrian.
You told us about AdGuard Home, but you didn't say how you put it onto your router.
I actually run it as part of my home automation under Home Assistant. That's the way I do it. Essentially, it doesn't go on your router. It can be on a little Raspberry Pi on your network or other kind of similar device, or even a big machine. You can run it. You just download the binary and start running it. But once it's running, then you have to configure your network so that when it does a DNS lookup, instead of going to Google, it goes to this new locally running service instead.
Oh,
so
okay.
Two things you need to do is to start it somewhere on your network, and then configure your router. It's probably in the DHCP configurations, so that when your desktop does a DNS lookup, it goes to this new running service on your network.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to be doing networking next month, so maybe we can touch more details on that next month.
Okay, so this doesn't require you to go to each of your devices and change the DNS server on each device.
No, when you start up any device on your network, it'll send out a request to the network saying, "Who am I?" DHCP. And that DNS address will be in that response, so you can automatically configure it. It's going to keep the settings for a while, so you might choose to reboot some machines when you put it in, or restart the network stack or something. But essentially, you should be able to configure it once on your network.
Okay.
Any other thoughts for today's meeting?
Just to follow up, Peter, what you just said, presumably then this add-on device, Raspberry Pi or whatever, needs to be on a fixed IP address.
Yes, that is correct. So whether you use AdGuard Home or Pi-hole, it's exactly the same idea, really. It's a local DNS server. You need to set it up on a fixed IP address, as you say, and configure that IP address on your router's DHCP configuration. Okay. So, any other comments or thoughts about this privacy? Hopefully, it's kind of an interesting way to kind of start talking about privacy. It's always difficult where to start with because you end up giving, personal opinions and that sort of stuff, which I'll try not to do, but start from a, technology sort of point of view, see how it actually works, and then, it gives us something to talk about. Paul.
Yeah, just as a final thing, I put something in the chat about what happened with Samsung TV some time ago. Our smart TV, fortunately, didn't have camera and microphone in it. The later ones did, and that's when the problems started. But the thing to be cautious about here, and I'm sure everybody's well aware of this, is this Internet of Things. The stuff we're connecting to the internet now that we have no control over whatsoever. And smart speakers and things that have, microphones and cameras on all the time. And a lot of these devices, they auto update, and there's nothing we can do with them if we happen to have them, or if it's installed as part of the device that we bought for some other reason.
Yeah, so a common technique, if you're into home automation, or as you say, this Internet of Things, is you install a device and you actually monitor its networking, and then go into Pi-hole or AdGuard, and anything it's reaching out which you don't understand, just block straight away. And actually, I could have shown you in my configuration, I've got a old router still on my network, and it's doing all sorts of stuff which is going out to the network. I just block it all and just use a little piece of functionality on that I really want to use.
I'm just wondering if some of the IoT stuff, though, if it stops it working, if you do stuff like that.
Typically, if you do this home automation a lot, what you find is that to do an initial setup of a new device, you need to get it to reach out and configure to some sort of cloud service. Once it's configured, then you can completely block it. So it doesn't share any more information out. I mean, that's, you see that a lot anyway.
Well, I had a big problem with Bose speakers, and it was setting up its own unencrypted Wi-Fi network to do the configuration and stuff. And in fact, when I moved house, I lost all those settings, obviously, because it was a new router. And effectively, I've had to turn the Wi-Fi off and just use the Bluetooth, because the way they're doing it means that they were actually, and it's in their terms and conditions, they're actually monitoring all my content. So if I'm going to Amazon and streaming music through the speaker, it's logging everything I was effectively doing with that speaker, which I think is a gross invasion of privacy, but it's in their terms and conditions.
Yeah, it certainly is fascinating watching these logs of DNS queries. It's quite surprising what you see. And of course, a lot of routers will give you, real-time information about what's going on in your networks. That's also can be quite a bit of an eye-opener, what's going on in your network. Anything else for anything else? I want to mention one thing before we sign off.
I'd like to ask something about Apple devices.
Mm-hmm.
Does everything you've said apply equally to Apple devices as to, Android and others?
You saw in the where I was going to looking at terms of service that Apple scored a C, which is, not great, but it's not too bad either. It's average, I suppose. So Apple are, better than many, but they're not perfect, and sites like, Google and Amazon and such like are really the bad players. So yeah, Apple tends to be better than others. They do tend to have a fairly strict privacy, but don't think for a second they don't do real-time bidding. They do.
And so if you run Amazon and Google on your Apple device, then you're just as open.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks.
The only thing I would add to that, Peter, is that if you've got an Android phone, there's potentially 3 bits of software on there. There's the telco stuff that goes with your SIM arrangement. There's the stuff that Google Android does, and there's lots of flavors of that and lots of different devices. And there's also what the manufacturers put on there. Whereas with Apple, at least Apple control the software that goes on the iPhone. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's more integrated, shall we say, than. And it's the same argument with Microsoft. There's so many different flavors of PCs these days, not just manufacturers, but also the cards that go in them, and therefore the device drivers. And I rather suspect that some of the device drivers are also got arrangements with various advertising companies and that. so that the video card's probably communicating with somewhere, to generate extra revenue for the card manufacturer.
Yeah, one good thing, in Android's defense is you can actually use Android without Google. So you can actually buy phones, which are Android phones, but have got no Google software in it whatsoever. And, if you've got an old like Samsung phone, you can download a Android operating system with no Google on it. So you can get it. And it's quite a big thing these days. De-Googling your life is
right.
quite popular, as is, de-Amazon your life and de-Microsoft your life and all the rest of it.
You have to jailbreak it to do that. And is the version of Android you're running at some point, was that written by Google, or is it third party?
Android itself is a non-profit group. And they produce a thing called ASOP, Android something, and then Google take that and add Google Maps and all the rest of it, and the App Store and such like, and then Samsung take that from Google and add all the Samsung bits and pieces. But absolutely, Android itself is open source. You can download it, you can build it yourself. But of course, you wouldn't get all the Google features on it. So a lot of people do that. And before many people sign off, obviously I'm recording it, so I'll upload this, and there'll be a post on the U3A Communities site, and you'll get an email, I think probably tomorrow lunchtime-ish, with that, and that page containing the slides and the video, you'll be able to add comments to the bottom. So if you start doing some investigations or ask some questions, then wait for that email tomorrow, go to the web page, and you can add some comments at the bottom, particularly if you sort of start testing your browsers and you find one browser is pretty good, and do share it with the rest of us.
Do the comments appear in the video, Peter?
No.
In the recording, right? Okay, yeah.
No, I can save them, but I don't particularly push that to YouTube.
Yeah, there was one other thing. A group of us got together once at work, and about 24 of us on a course about using the internet and how to do searching, which is primarily what the course was. But as an experiment, we all went off and did some random browsing, and then we all asked Google precisely the same question, and we got something like 15 plus different answers back. So what I'm saying there is, when you're doing your searching, what you're getting back may well be shaped by what Google thinks you want to know, and it might not necessarily be what you want to know, because it's looking at your recent browsing. And of course, the best way around that is to frequently to do the cookie resets and open a new browser and things like that. So what you're searching for may not be what you expect.
Yep, that's quite a good way to put that. Okay, so next month we are doing home networking, and we're going to touch on broadband and home network security to some extent. So, some of these bits that have come up today, we can pick it up next month. After that, 3D printing, and after that, quantum computing, which I'm especially looking forward to. Okay, so unless there's anything else, I suggest we leave it at that. Getting on to 5 o'clock now, so we've had a fair whack. No other comments. So, go on, Paul. Oh, that's a yeah. All right.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Very good talk.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Very good indeed. Yeah, absolutely brilliant.